Every 15 years, God unleashes millions of monsters to control the population. Humanity has attempted to fight them, but the monsters are too powerful, leaving people with no choice but to hide. The film opens with the tale of the first Judgment Day. From the depths of the earth, monsters emerged from ordinary minds, overwhelming cities and killing millions. A brutal war ensued, but eventually, the monsters were eradicated. In response, protective gates were built over the former wells, designed to shield people from future invasions. 15 years have passed, and the world has slowly begun to recover. One of the survivors is Laura, who now works at a school. She has a persistent but unsuccessful suitor, Milton, whom she frequently turns down for dates, likely due to lingering resentment toward her ex-husband, Dave. During Judgment Day, Dave was absent, leaving Laura, who was pregnant at the time, to fend for herself. Dave and Laura share a 15-year-old son, Tyler, who spends his days at the skate park with friends and his girlfriend, Maddie. In his free time, he plays computer games and finds himself caught between the tense relationship of his estranged parents, who separated shortly after his birth. Meanwhile, tension is rising. An eclipse looms, a known precursor to a potential monster invasion. Seismic activity is increasing, prompting emergency checks by dome personnel, and the news is filled with unsettling reports. Fish are dying off en masse, a phenomenon that occurred right before the first Judgment Day. The migration patterns of animals are equally alarming, mirroring the events of 15 years ago. Tyler is spending the weekend with his father when the phone rings. It's Dave's old friend, Ted, who is convinced that a new Judgment Day is imminent. He urges Dave to gather his family and seek refuge in his shelter before the eclipse begins. Meanwhile, a monster quietly sneaks up the stairs under the protective dome. At the same time, Laura calls Dave, having seen the alarming news. She demands that Dave bring Tyler home immediately. Milton has secured a spot in a shelter, and she believes it's their only hope. Dave tries to reassure her, insisting that Tyler is safe with him. As they speak, Tyler receives a text message, reads it, and slips out of the house unnoticed. Laura, in a panic, insists that Dave's house isn't safe and urges him to bring Tyler to her right away. Dave agrees and heads to Tyler's room, only to find it empty. Milton urges Laura to hurry. The shelter is filling up quickly. She explains that she can't find Tyler. Using his phone, Milton tracks Tyler's location to the skate park. Indeed, Tyler is there with Maddie, who is anxious because her parents have left her alone. She's scared and pleads with Tyler not to abandon her. Tyler promises that he won't repeat his father's mistake and vows never to leave Maddie behind. Suddenly, the cry of birds fills the air as massive flocks fly in the same direction. Panic spreads through the park, and people start fleeing the town. Dave rushes to the park to find Tyler, but gets stuck in a massive traffic jam, forcing him to abandon his car and continue on foot. Meanwhile, under the dome, a worker checks the instruments. Strange rustling and noises fill the air. Suddenly, a monster appears, attacking and brutally killing the worker. Nearby soldiers open fire, but their bullets are ineffective against the creature. Tyler and Maddie watch in horror as panic ensues around them. Dave arrives just as Tyler explains that Maddie has nowhere else to go, and he couldn't leave her behind. Laura pulls up with Milton and takes everyone to the shelter, where they have reserved spots. With just over an hour before the eclipse, chaos grips the city as people desperately try to escape, causing traffic jams everywhere. They finally reach the shelter, but it's heavily guarded by the military, who are only allowing women and children inside. Dave instructs Tyler to take care of his mother and sends them into the shelter, while he and Milton stay behind in the crowd. But Tyler, unable to leave his father, runs back to him. Laura and Maddie chase after him. Tyler shouts, "He's my father, I won't leave him." At that moment, a message appears on the scoreboard. The shelter is full. There are no more spots available. Without wasting time, they rush back to the car. Dave suggests heading to Ted's hideout in the desert, while Milton proposes taking refuge at the nearby school, which has a basement. They encounter another traffic jam, with dozens of cars blocking the road. Forced to abandon their vehicle, they start on foot. An earthquake begins as the solar disk is engulfed in shadow. The eclipse has started. Under the protective dome, the monsters break free, swarming the city, crawling, flying, and spreading chaos. Dave suggests they leave the city, believing it to be far too dangerous to stay. He wants to drive, but Milton protests. It's his car, and he insists he knows how to keep everyone safe. The argument escalates between them until a flying monster suddenly snatches Milton, lifting him high into the sky. Laura screams in terror as Dave quickly pushes her into the car, and they attempt to escape the nightmare around them. They drive along a canal. with Dave reassuring the children that everything will be fine and that they'll find a way out. However, the car is running low on gas. Dave decides to find a replacement vehicle and spots several cars up ahead. He enters one of the cars, discovering an elderly man hiding in the back seat. The man silently gestures toward a massive, blood-covered monster that resembles a skeletal bull. The creature is dangerously close. Fortunately, it passes by the car without noticing them, instead beginning to devour a nearby body. Dave carefully backs the car up to where Laura and the kids are waiting. Now both cars are side by side, but they need to switch vehicles. Just then, the bull notices them. The elderly man exits the car and distracts the bull by sprinkling salt from a jar he had been holding. The bull momentarily halts, allowing Laura and the children to rush into Dave's car. The bull then charges at the man, tearing him apart, but Dave manages to drive away in time. As hordes of monsters swarm the city, Dave drives along an abandoned mountain road. They finally reach Ted's hideout, which is a well-fortified concrete bunker. Despite knocking, no one answers, and the doors remain closed. Inside, Ted is watching the monitors, a gun held to his neck by someone standing behind him. Outside, a herd of monsters is charging toward the bunker. Dave grabs a tire iron, ready to defend his family, but at the last moment, the bunker doors open, and they all rush inside. Relieved, Dave hugs Ted. In the bunker, they find Ted's wife, Stella, and a military man sitting in the corner, whom Ted introduces as Corporal Garrett Jensen. On the monitors, they watch the monsters attempting to break down the door. The atmosphere is tense, and Garrett remains distant. Maddie asks how the monsters are able to sense them. Can they see through walls? Garrett smirks and explains that they react to light and heat, but adds ominously that he believes they can see their souls. They are the offspring of the devil, which means God too. They torment the flesh, but feed on the soul, he says. Laura asks if he's religious, to which Garrett replies, "Today, yes." Garrett then recounts how, on the first Judgment Day, he was working at a refinery. When the monsters invaded, he managed to hide in a pond of salty mud, which the monsters avoided. He sat there, listening helplessly, as the creatures slaughtered 150 of his colleagues and friends. As Garrett becomes absorbed in his story, he doesn't notice Ted signaling to Dave to take a knife. Dave quietly understands and grabs the knife. Garrett continues, "That's why it's called Judgment Day. The devil reigns on this day." At this moment, a creature resembling a centipede crawls from the street and slips through a small hole in the mesh covering the window. Garrett volunteers to take the first watch. Ted invites everyone to stay and gives Dave a significant look. But just then, Garrett pulls a gun from his holster, forcing Dave to drop the knife. Garrett explains that he discovered this hideout and that kind-hearted Stella let him in, despite Ted's objections. He insists that, just as he survived the first Judgment Day, he'll survive this one, no matter the cost. Tyler lunges at Garrett, trying to wrestle the gun from him, but Garrett easily pushes him away. Dave steps in to calm Garrett down. Suddenly, the centipede-like monster darts out of the wall and attacks Stella, who is standing nearby. Ted rips it off his wife's neck and douses it with salt, while Dave seizes the opportunity to grab Garrett's gun and shoot the creature. More monsters emerge, but the group manages to fend them off. They tie Garrett up and try to stop Stella's bleeding. Then, Dave notices a new threat, another monstrous bull approaching, and he realizes they're in a hopeless situation. They need to escape the bunker. The bull begins to ram the doors. Ted is reluctant to leave, fearing Stella won't survive outside. However, Stella urges him to go with the group, revealing there's an underground passage beneath the bunker that leads to the mountains. Garrett pleads to join them, claiming he has a car with a full tank and can take them to the gate, where there are more bunkers. He insists that since the creatures emerged from there, they won't return. Though skeptical, the group decides to take him along. "Get us there, and we'll forget everything." Dave tells Garrett. They arm themselves with weapons from Ted's arsenal as the bull continues to pound the doors, but they manage to escape into the tunnel. As they head toward the car, Stella's condition worsens. Dave and Laura begin arguing, with Laura accusing him of making a poor decision. They could have been safely in the shelter. Just then, Tyler spots a dead monster by the roadside. Maddie approaches it, only for long tentacles to suddenly emerge from a hole in the ground, wrapping around her legs and trying to drag her away. Maddie screams, and Tyler and Dave rush to rescue her. Seeing the urgency, Dave cuts Garrett's ropes, allowing him to help. They reach the top of the mountain and look down at the devastated, burning city. When they return to the car, it refuses to start. Meanwhile, more monsters appear at the top of the mountain and begin charging toward them. Garrett frantically tries to start the engine, while Stella, seeing the approaching monsters, glances at the gun in her husband's hands. She then takes the gun, steps out of the car, and walks toward the monsters, accepting her fate. Ted pleads with her, tears streaming down his face, but Dave forcefully pulls him back into the car. Just in time, the car engine roars to life, and they speed away with the horde of monsters in hot pursuit. On the way, they pick up a radio signal, reporting that most shelters have failed to withstand the onslaught and have been destroyed. Laura places her hand on Dave's shoulder as he gently strokes her hand in reassurance. They arrive at the gate, finding it deserted but with the doors open. Garrett informs them that the hideout is in the basement. They head there, but the power needs to be restored first. Garrett and Dave volunteer to handle it while the others search for the first aid post, as Ted has a wound on his back. Dave successfully restores the electricity. Garrett mentions that the gate was prepared for a second invasion, with tons of salt pumped into the wells, but they were too deep. As they rejoin the others, they hear the roar of monsters and come across a bloodied corpse. With just 2 hours left until the eclipse ends, Garrett suggests they hide in a chemical warehouse, where the doors are impenetrable. Suddenly, a monster attacks Garrett. With Dave's help, they manage to fend it off, but the noise attracts more monsters. Garrett quickly runs through a door and shuts it behind him. He gives himself an injection, causing his veins to swell and turn black. Dave returns to his family and asks Tyler to protect his mother while he's away. Dave plans to turn the tide by channeling salt water through the tank pipes to keep the monsters at bay. Laura kisses him and urges him to be careful. Dave navigates through the ventilation and sees a monster devouring its prey. He needs to turn off the taps near the feeding monster. Successfully, he opens the faucet, filling containers with water. As Dave climbs back, the monster senses him and charges. He fights back, sprinkling it with salt, and the monster crumbles to dust. As they continue, they pick up a radio signal reporting that nearly all the shelters have been overwhelmed and destroyed. Laura rests her hand on Dave's shoulder, and he gently strokes it in comfort. They arrive at the gate, which is deserted, but with its doors left open. Garrett informs them that the hideout is located in the basement. While heading there, they realize the power needs to be restored. Garrett and Dave volunteer to handle it, while the others search for a first aid station. Ted has a wound on his back. Dave manages to restore the electricity. Garrett mentions that the gate was fortified all the monsters retreat through the gate, with tons of salt pumped into the wells. Children and Laura rush out to an open area, where they find Garrett standing with a gun. He shoots Tyler, coldly stating, "This isn't our world anymore. He won't survive anyway. God's taking a day off," and prepares to shoot again. Laura tries to shield her son with her body, but Dave rushes in and strikes Garrett in the head with a fire extinguisher. Garrett falls to the ground, and Dave immediately embraces Tyler and Laura. Just then, a massive monster emerges. It lunges at Garrett, who is closest, and swallows him whole. They rush into the medical unit and quickly prepare a salty mixture in a cylinder as the monster approaches. It breaks down the doors, but Dave manages to hurl the canister at it. The mixture explodes, and the monster lets out a wild roar before disintegrating into ash. Laura embraces Dave. They can't believe they've been saved. Holding each other, the two couples step outside. The world is devastated, but the monsters are gone. This might just be a brief respite, but one thing is certain: life will be reborn, and light will always triumph over darkness. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you.